Thank you. Senator Schmitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling today's very important hearing. I think this is an issue very important to the country. And I want to focus specifically, I'm going to kind of try to stay on script to stay on time, on Judge Boasberg, who is the embodiment of a rogue judge, which I think is the subject of this hearing. I have a few questions. Of course, I've called for his impeachment, and I want to use this time to sort of explain why. Mr. Chamberlain, why do federal judges wear black robes?
I actually don't know the answer to that.
Well, it's to show, I think, impartiality, right? They're certainly not wearing red jerseys or blue jerseys. They wear them to symbolize the impartiality that's supposed to come with that very important commission. And do you know what color robes Judge Boasberg wears in the courtroom? Did you wear?
I would assume they're black.
Well, it turns out it's probably blue, and I'm going to explain why. I'd like to enter into the record, Mr. Chairman. The Department of Justice July 28th judicial misconduct complaint against Judge Boasberg, which reads as follows. On March 11, 2025, Judge Boasberg attended a session at the Judicial Conference of the United States. While there, Judge Boasberg attempted to improperly influence Chief Justice Roberts and roughly 24 other federal judges by straying from the traditional topics to expand on his belief that the Trump administration would, quote, disregard rulings of federal courts, end quote, and quote, trigger a constitutional crisis. This was on March 11th. What happened on March 15th, Mr. Chamberlain, later that week?
Well, he managed to enable the Alien Enemies Act case. The Alien Enemies Act.
That's right. Judge Boasberg issued the turn the planes around order just a few days after that. Within the next week, Judge Boasberg was acting on his preconceived belief that the Trump administration would not follow court orders. Although he lacked authority to do so, he issued a temporary restraining order preventing the government from removing violent Tren de Agua terrorists, which the Supreme Court, by the way, summarily vacated shortly thereafter. Not only that, he forced his way onto the case. In the dead of night, while he's on vacation, Judge Boasberg abused his power as chief judge to force himself onto that case. Judge Boasberg doesn't judge cases involving President Trump impartially. He has made it clear time and time again in his rulings and his comments that he, instead of wearing that black robe, wears, in fact, a blue jersey. He has continually abused the power as chief judge in 5 separate ways. 1, forcing himself onto hot-button cases. 2, abusing his power in the judicial conference to fearmonger to the judiciary about the specter of a non-existent constitutional crisis. 3, rubber-stamped gag orders on subpoenas against U.S. senators. 4, trying to hold DOJ lawyers in contempt for a case the Supreme Court said he had no jurisdiction over. And 5, he sits on the Circuit Judicial Council, which would be able to overturn any disciplinary action taken against him, interestingly. Article 3 has not policed itself. That's the reality. We have to be able to check a rogue judge through the impeachment process, and I don't say that lightly. The House must exercise that power. I want to also note, Professor Luther, it's good to see you again. I appreciate your testimony. You're an expert on the American judiciary and judicial power. Article 3 states that judges should hold their offices during, quote unquote, good behavior. If a judge then steers a case involving that litigant from another judge to himself by reassigning that case outside of normal procedure, is that good behavior or abuse of the judicial process?
That is not good behavior. There's surely an internal operating rule on how cases are assigned, and to violate it would be a violation of his judicial duty.
If a judge were aware of a federal statute prohibiting him from issuing a certain type of order and then issues that prohibited order, is that good behavior or abuse of judicial power?
I think that's a violation of the judicial oath, so an abuse of judicial power.
On the flip side, if that judge were unaware of the statute, the facts in the case, or the parties being subject to the prohibited order, yet granted the order anyways, is that good behavior or a violation of the Article 3 duty and an abuse of judicial power?
Well, if he didn't know about the rule, that's maybe a little vaguer. But, you know, we expect our federal judges to be aware of the law, just like we expect citizens to be aware of the law, and we hold them accountable even if they weren't. So in that case, it would probably be a violation of judicial duty.
I just want to close. Chief Justice Roberts said you don't impeach judges you disagree with. You get them overturned on appeal. With Judge Boasberg, this is not about disagreeing with some interpretation of the law. Judge Boasberg has abused his role as chief judge, which are appealable ministerial acts. He is a rogue judge. The House should vote to impeach Judge Boasberg based on the articles they have before them. Once the House impeaches, we should hold a trial and hold Judge Boasberg accountable.
Thank you, Senator Schmitt. As I referenced earlier, with no objection, I will introduce into the record, number one, Judge Boasberg's order. Number two, my letter urging Speaker Johnson to advance pending articles of impeachment against both Judge Boasberg and Judge Boardman that was transmitted today. And number three, the record of the Boardman's sentencing decision. Without objection, all three will be admitted.